Talks. I'm very happy to welcome another segment of our Hospitality Talks live stream. We've been traveling now virtually on the magic carpet through the different parts of the world. I'm very happy that we have landed into my favorite region, which is the Gulf region, and we have a great group of guests joining us. And so let me share this with my co-host Abid. So Abid, who is joining us today? But I think also is that Abid, that the mentality and the attitude over there is that you're looking forward, you're looking for a solution, what are you going to do next? So there has been sort of I think it's in the DNA of the people who are living there, and I have a great deal of respect from the time I lived there. I used to live in one building, so I was seeing how they were building this Burj Khalifa, one floor a week, and everything was going on 24 hours a day. And I think it's wonderful to see how each destination, and now particularly how the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has developed is becoming a major tourism destination. So it's all very exciting times, and I cannot wait really to return one day over there.
Abdellah Essonni, who is Chief Hospitality Officer for MAAD International. Welcome, everybody, and welcome to all of our viewers. Ramadan Kareem to people that are celebrating the Holy Month. So, Ali, if I may start with you, just before we went on the air, we were talking about all of us having lived in the region and spent time there. Inevitably, any conversation these days starts and revolves with COVID-19 pandemic. As we were talking about, the Ramadan feels very different today than it ever has. Can you tell us what it is like in Bahrain? What is the state of business affairs today, please?
First of all, thank you for having me, Ramadan Kareem, everybody. I think it's a very special time of the year, so we're all excited about it arriving, even though arriving slightly differently. So yeah, COVID-19, it's definitely in the minds of everybody. Different experiences around the world. For Bahrain, I think I can speak definitely firsthand because I've experienced it. As a nation, we've done exceptionally well. We've been complimented by WHO for how we handled it. I think we've pretty much been able to keep it under control, under TAPS. I think our medical services have not been overwhelmed. We've had a very controlled, limited number of cases and fatalities. As a nation, we've bonded together to raise a lot of capital from private sector, from public sector to help support the economy. They put in all the different types of packages to keep the support going. Almost a 4.3 billion dollars worth of package announced from the government to pay public service salaries, private sector salaries, postpone rental payments, postpone electricity, water, any sort of burden that you might have for the next 3 months. So they've done that across for big and small organizations, just to make sure that at least to steady the wave of hits. However, I'll be honest, there's been impact. We have definitely closed down retail shops for a couple of weeks. We have closed down certain mass operations in the economy for a few weeks just to make sure that we're able to keep the curve low and plateau. Now we're slowly in the process of opening back up. So now today we had an experiment of 2 weeks off, 2 weeks on, and now we're back to the 2 weeks off to maintain another couple of weeks before then we get into Ramadan Eid period. If we speak primarily about the hospitality industry, definitely it's been impacted like everywhere in the world. The planes are not flying, customers are not coming in. In fact, local travel is small. Bahrain relies heavily on about 85% of its tourists come from Saudi Arabia from the Causeway, which has been shut for the last month or so. So that is about 9 million visitors per year. Out of the 11 million visitors that we get, about 11.7 total. So definitely a big hit on that side. However, what we're seeing in terms of sentiment, the sentiment so far has been of resilience, of being strong, of adapting, and trying to come up with innovative solutions. One main thing, for example, is the hotels have started delivery. For Ramadan, for example, in Ramadan we have 2 different times of eating, early morning and an evening meal. So usually we used to go in Ramadan to hotels, have feasts, and have a nice time in the evening and gatherings and so forth. Today, hotels have started delivering set meals and set menus to replicate that in your house, for example. So they're trying to come up with innovative ways to handle this. And then some of the hotels have started offering isolation services or medical support services for private sector who don't want to go through the regular route and they have the capacity to afford a bit more of a luxurious stay and so forth. But the rest of the industry in terms of travel, tours and so forth is now at the moment on halt.
Okay. Thank you, Ali. I'm gonna jump around a little bit. Let me ask Khalid to give us a bit of the same as to what things are like in UAE, in Abu Dhabi, Dubai, and a little bit about his hotels as to how many of them might still be open or shut down, please.
Ramadan Kareem to everybody, and thank you for inviting me. Look, the UAE has certainly been impacted like any place in the world today, knowing that UAE government had preferred clearly people's health over the economy, which is the right thing to do, and it's paying off today. I can say that it's under control. The UAE is a country where most of tests are taking place on a daily basis. I think from that side is very well controlled. Now, the economy, of course, is suffering like everybody else. Likely there have been some subsidies from the government, and we anticipate further initiative from governments really to preserve and mitigate what is happening today in terms of job losses and shutdown of hotels. Yes, hotels, most of the hotels are obviously with zero activity. The ones that are open are mainly catering to the quarantine or hotels with residence components. So these are still functioning. The sentiment is, of course, is to continue to, to put forward people's health over the economy, as I said. So there has been some lift of certain restrictions, mainly within the F&B sector. However, that remain, I would say, will have very modest impacts on the income, because if you operate, very well, operating a restaurant at 30%, you barely make money. So it's economically, it's not really viable. So we are trying to evaluate, and we are trying to see how we can eventually adapt our operational practices to allow us to operate. And I think we should really learn today, because that maybe need to stay for quite some time. Yeah.
Very true. We all are going to have to adapt to live with this bug, because until such time a vaccine is developed, it is still going to be around. Abdullah, I remember when we were originally talking about your large development in Mecca, the opening has been delayed a bit. Can you talk a little bit about what Saudi Arabia is going through and what your own development has experienced during this time?
Right. Well, thank you for this opportunity, and Ramadan Kareem to everyone as well. Yeah, we spoke about this, Abid. Our project in Mecca is one of the largest in the region. MAAD International is actually a JV between two major business conglomerates, namely Dalla Al Baraka and Wadi Al Khalil. It consists of, it's a mixed-use project that consists of 11,000 rooms in 3 different phases. So phase 1 in particular, which consists of 4,500 rooms, was ready to open for this Ramadan season. So we were accelerating pretty much everything to be ready for this major season. As you know, in Mecca, there are 2 seasons that represent pretty much 65 to 70% of the hotel's revenues in Mecca. So one of them is Ramadan, which is the whole month of Ramadan. It extends to 40 days in most cases. We had to postpone our opening, unfortunately. I say unfortunately, but it's also a blessing, because as we were getting ready to open, we sort of held off on recruitment, for example. So we don't have a full-fledged team. We have a skeleton team. So at least that sort of alleviates the operating cost somewhat. Now, Saudi Arabia was very, very prompt. The government very quickly started imposing restrictions as soon as this pandemic came to be known. And that helped a lot in keeping the numbers down. So today, we're looking at less than 20,000 confirmed cases, knowing that the testing is very, very rigorous. And out of the 20,000 cases, less than 1%, I think about 0.6% deaths, and the recovery rate is quite high. It's almost 20%. So all of that is thanks to the all the restrictions that were put in place. We were all confined to our homes or to our immediate area. So obviously, people were still allowed to go out and shop for groceries and things. But it was you were confined to your direct area. A couple of days ago, they eased up on these restrictions a little bit. So we see malls opening yesterday, but with a limited capacity. And as we go, more restrictions are going to be lifted. Hopefully, in the next, I don't know, month and a half or 2 months, they'll be totally lifted.
Oh, that's great. It is challenging. I know Saudi Arabia, particularly from religious tourism point of view, that this time of the year is possibly the busiest time of the year. And with the Mecca having been completely quarantined, I'm sure that has saved the transmission of this virus a bit. While I have you, Abdullah, can you talk a little bit about Saudi Arabia's ambitious economic reform project of Vision 2030? We talked at the beginning of our session how tourism is becoming a critical component in diversifying the economy. So can you shed some light on that Vision 2030 and how different projects are coming together?
Sure, yeah. Well, Vision 2030 is indeed a very, very ambitious plan among the overall national transformational plan, which the aim of which is mainly to diversify the economy away from the dependence on oil. Now, tourism in particular had taken the center stage in this transformation, and I'm sure you all heard about the mega projects that were announced a couple of years ago that will make of Saudi Arabia one of the most attractive destinations when it comes to family travel, adventure travel, marine travel. To just name a few of these projects, which are really, really impressive, you take the Red Sea Development Project, for example, that's just off of the northern part of Jeddah onto the Red Sea. We're looking at 90 islands, 22 of which are going to be developed. The total area of this project alone is 34,000 square kilometers. To put that in perspective, Dubai is about 4,000 square kilometers. So here we're talking about 34,000 square kilometers, almost 8 times the size of Dubai, and it's geared mostly towards family travel, like I said, adventure travel. It had that part of Saudi Arabia has unspoiled beaches with yet to be discovered coral reefs. So in terms of diving, it'll probably be one of the best areas to go for that kind of sport. And then you have NEOM, another huge project with 28,000 square kilometers. And it's very unique because it touches on 3 different countries. So it starts in Saudi Arabia, and it extends to the southern part of Jordan and the eastern part of Egypt. And this is meant to be the city of the future. It'll be more advanced technologically than any known city in the world today. There's the Qiddiya, north of Riyadh, about 40 kilometers north of Riyadh. And that's a huge entertainment city where they teamed up with Six Flags, the American theme park. There we're talking roughly about 350 square kilometers, so far bigger than Disney World. And it'll have all kinds of rides, all kinds of sports activities, family entertainment. And then there's a few other projects. I don't think we have the time to list all of them, but it is very, very ambitious, and they've broken ground in most of these projects already, so it's well underway. Now, as far as the impact of the pandemic on these projects or on the plan as a whole, it's hard to say. I mean, these projects are slated for the future. So the first one is not going to open, or it's not going to start being operational until maybe 2022. Hopefully by then things will come back to normal. Yeah, so that's basically it.
Thank you. These projects are a couple of years away, so hopefully by then COVID would be behind us. But for some of the other investments that might be partially underway, Ali, have you seen any change in interest for Bahrain for investments that might be being thought about from tourism point of view, or do you see still being a pretty buoyant market? Ali?
I had muted my mic. My apologies. So I think so. There's the long-term view, and there's the short-term conversation here. So to be honest, we're looking at we're in the business of foreign direct investment as the Economic Development Board. So we're tracking our numbers for the year, and so far we've seen a healthy pipeline that is continuing to progress. Has there been impact on some parts of the pipeline? Yes, because some of them require physically somebody to travel in to sign on some documents and stuff like that. So some of those things are being impacted. So on the short, I would say in the long term, the sentiment remains very similar. The fundamentals are still there. We get 10 times our population as visitors from a very affluent GCC nations. We've invested about $8 billion in our new airline upgrade. We've invested $2 billion or $1.8 billion in our new airport. So we've invested in infrastructure. We've invested about $32 billion in public and private infrastructure in Kingdom of Bahrain. So we're very optimistic about it to continue in the long run. But in the short run, yes, today there are decisions that are being made to see, okay, can we postpone this? Let's see how we do when we come out of this. What will be the impact of the new development in the way we do things on the future of this decision and investment as well. So there's a whole bunch of considerations that are being taken. In general, what we have seen in terms of pipelines and in terms of FDI so far, progress has been very healthy. And it's continuing to progress slowly. We are trying to overcome smartly certain things that we used to do manually, certain things that we were not used to, even as a government, would not accept to do manually. So now, for example, you see all our steering committees chaired by the Crown Prince and any Royal Highnesses are now being done digitally. Most of the urban planning commissions and so forth digitally. And so there's a lot of these things that are happening online now, allowing us to progress. Supported by the legislation. So there are laws that have passed through Parliament to allow to do that, including general meetings for companies as well, and AGMs and so forth. So yes, hopefully we're starting to come up with the mechanisms that are trying to reduce or now help projects progress further. But in the short run today, everybody's kind of standing right now and seeing, okay, what could the future look like? That is the question we're trying to answer today.
I have a
question. Again, if I pack that with my earlier comment, at Bahrain so far we've been very lucky because of this great leadership on controlling this. We are feeling a lot more upbeat than many other nations.
I have a question, Ali. For those who don't know the region very well, how would you describe Bahrain standing out to? What is it differentiating to areas like United Arab Emirates and what now is being developing in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia?
So we're all, first of all, we're very close families. We're very close brothers and sisters in the area. Cultures are similar, but yet very unique. It is a massive continent. Just to put perspective, about 50 million people. So it's not a small place. So if you take 50 million and take it to UK, for example, you understand the diversity between North, East, West and stuff. There's subtle differences, right? But in reality, there are differences. So in Bahrain, we have about 5,000 years of documented history. We are one of the few places in the world that has 3 UNESCO heritage sites. So we have a lot of culture of our own. We were one of the earliest trading islands or nations in the area. We're mostly, if you want to define... sorry?
Sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. So if you want to, just to understand us a bit more versus some of our neighbors, we're an island nation. So we're an archipelago of 33 original islands. Everybody else is on the mainland, either on the coast or so forth, but we're actually island people. So we're milder, nicely tanned, very Hawaiian look, and mixed with a lot of culture there. And a lot of history of trade. So we're very, very, very comfortable with international presence. So Bahrain has been rated number 1 for expat living by Internations for a few years globally. Number 3 and number 5 by HSBC in terms of expat living. Quite high rankings. So good, nice, modern feel that Bahrain provides versus some of the other nations. So the other nations have their own strong identities. I'm sure Khalid and Abdellah can explain how Abu Dhabi with its own special culture and special experience can help differentiate. But for us, We think we are the perfect gateway to the Gulf. We are somewhere in the middle of being a bit more of a liberal, open, relaxed society with an island feel, and a smaller chunk to test and do your setup and expand into the greater markets of UAE and Saudi Arabia. So it's a very good starting point for international trace.
Thank you. And Khalid, I have a question for you. For those who seem to know more about Dubai because of the various projects and events that they have done, how would you describe sort of Abu Dhabi? Abu Dhabi is in fact one of my favorite places, but for those who don't know Abu Dhabi, what are the things that you say would differentiate to the other areas of the UAE?
Look, I mean, what comes in my mind, there are two things: nature and culture. So Abu Dhabi, it's really, it's one of the best, beautiful place in the Gulf. Look, I've worked in, and lived in Bahrain, and I worked and lived in Saudi Arabia, and now I'm living in Dubai. They are all beautiful places, but I mean, if we talk nature and culture, Abu Dhabi take it over, I would say. Yeah.
Very good. And now, in terms of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, you have sort of the capital, Riyadh, and then you have Jeddah. Now, Jeddah has a long history of international, maybe it's been sort of the gate for the pilgrims. But how would you describe Jeddah for those people who don't know the area itself?
Right. So just recently, a couple of years ago, the Jeddah Corniche had been sort of revamped, and it's a beautiful walk now that stretches over about 15 kilometers. So it's one of the longest Corniche strands, if you wish. There's a lot of family activities all along the Corniche. On the weekend, it gets so packed, especially in the evening when the weather is gentler. And then as part of the changes that the society had seen in Saudi Arabia, Jeddah had become a destination for entertainment, open air concerts. Recently they've allowed cinemas. Obviously there's always a mall culture, so there's some really nice shopping malls that contain all kinds of activities and entertainment means. And Jeddah is along the Red Sea, so for the more adventurous people that are into diving or into sand dune bashing, there's so much to do just within a few kilometers from the center of Jeddah. One of the most anticipated projects is the transformation of the old part of Jeddah. That's where the cultural center is. That's where Jeddah spun from originally, and there are some historical sites there that right now are being restored and very soon will be open to the public. It sort of reflects how Jeddah had started since the early ages. And like you said, Sam, Jeddah is a gateway into Mecca and Medina, which are the main pilgrimage sites. And as such, it's always been a destination for people from all over the world. Originally, it used to come by sea, some came by road. So the social fabric of Jeddah itself is so cosmopolitan. It's made up of almost every race there is in the world today. And it resulted in a mosaic of cultures. And all of that is being revived as part of these societal changes that we see recently in Jeddah.
Thank you. Just for the viewers on LinkedIn, we had a number of viewers. We had a little bit of a issue with the audio, but that has been resolved. But if you have any questions or any comments to the panelists, please write down, and I will read out those questions towards the end of our broadcast. And also same for the YouTube viewers. Any comments or questions you have, please let me know. I will then address them at the end of the broadcast. Back to you, Abid.
Thank you, Sam. Khalid, the United Arab Emirates has organized large events. The Expo 2020 is scheduled later in the year, but in Abu Dhabi, it's Formula One or the other large events. Unfortunately, in the era of this pandemic, large events and large gatherings where hundreds of thousands of people get together is not possible. I know there have been conversations on Expo 2020, but could you shed some light on what Formula One might look like or what Expo 2020 might look like?
Look, as I said earlier, the government is very clear. It will continue to prefer public health over the fame, over the economics, whatever. So what I would say that we will be evaluating the circumstances and the situation, and then decisions will be taken accordingly. But as far as I'm concerned, I don't really see any type of events soon, considering the current pandemic in the whole world. So unfortunately, we will have to live without these events, without these mega events. Even today, weddings cannot take place. And unless a vaccine or a very, very strong and safe medicine or treatment comes out, it's going to be very, very difficult to organize any sort of events.
Fair enough. No, most of your hotels are shut down or operating at very minimal business levels with limited services. Most of the GCC region relies very heavily on expat labor, foreign labor. Can you talk a little bit about what Abu Dhabi National Hotels and your parent company has done, because you have a huge catering business as well? How have you handled the international labor portion?
Look, unfortunately, we found ourselves with quite a substantial number of people that are no longer needed, because of the current circumstances. Now, what are we trying to do today? We are keeping these people safe, knowing that, as you know, airlines cannot operate today from anywhere. So we are keeping these people safe. We are testing regularly. We are ensuring their health and safety, and waiting for better times. That's what we are doing. As far as the guest is concerned, we are also following the regulations of public health and health authority, and try to implement and follow their recommendations to make sure that the small number of guests that we have are also safe in our hotels.
Let's talk a little bit about recovery, and staying with you, Khalid. Can you talk, how do you see the recovery being? I'm sure it's not that from one day to the next our hotels would be packed and we go about our business, even though the drop might have been precipitous coming into it, but going out, it might be a bit of a slow recovery. Can you talk a little bit about what you have done and what you continue to do to prepare for the recovery, please?
Look, I mean, we believe 100% that we will rebound one day. Now, multi-million-dollar question is when. In the meantime, what we are doing, we are really assessing and trying to explore what type of tools and initiative that will allow us to offer, a very safe hotel in the future, in the near future. I think that's of paramount importance, really, to communicate on that and just take, for example, keyless systems within the hotels, online check-in, check-out, some sanitizers, tools at the entrance of the hotel. So I think that will be very important. And currently we are exploring all venues and to see how we can implement and what needs to be implemented. And we also listen very carefully to the authority, because we believe that there will be regulations. There are already regulations, but I'm sure there is going to be further regulations that would come, and we will try to adapt. Because we believe that we will unfortunately have to live with this at least for another, let's say, 8 to 1 year, 8 months to a year. So that we cannot continue to be shut down the way we are. We will have to operate. So we have to adapt, and we have to take whatever initiative to allow us to, to be safe and keep our customers and our employees safe.
Thank you. A lot of the big brands have launched these sanitized room initiatives, and how they're going to go about making sure that the guest safety is first and foremost. But for the travelers to get to the hotel, the entire journey from getting to the airport at their hometown and then getting on the plane and getting back in a limo to get to the hotel, that entire journey has to be considered. Abdullah, do you have any thoughts as to how the industry can gain consumer confidence back in making sure that they'll be safe, particularly in Saudi Arabia's case, because the religious tourism will rebound possibly the fastest?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because just today I saw the result of a survey that was conducted last week by HVS. One of the questions that were asked was, how soon would you fly, would you travel once it's safe? And more than 60% said that they would travel within a month to 3 months from when it's declared safe to travel, which I think is a very, very positive thing. Also, just recently, I saw one of the Emirates, Ras Al Khaimah, will start a new certification program for hotels that is mostly geared. It's called Stay Safe, and the objective of it is to make sure that the hotels undergo a full sterilization program, because as we all sure, one of the main concerns for travelers will be safety in terms of hygiene and health, etc. Now, Saudi Arabia is different mostly because of the fact that it's a religious destination, and religious tourism today constitutes more than 90% of Saudi inbound tourism. So the rebound will probably be quicker than anywhere else. Unfortunately, we lost Ramadan season, Hajj season. There's a big question mark on it. There has not been an official announcement of its cancellation yet, but it had been announced through the various feeder markets for Mecca to sort of hold back on any reservations yet until further notice. Ourselves, for our project, we had both seasons signed and sealed and confirmed with big groups from all over the world, and unfortunately we received cancellations, and we had to pay deposits back, etc. So that's a fact of life, something we have to live with. But we're confident that the rebound will be far quicker than anywhere else. It probably come back stronger than before, because a lot of people that had planned to perform either Umrah for Ramadan or Hajj, which is a compulsory pilgrimage. So a lot of people are going to come back with a vengeance, if you will. So we're optimistic in the rebound.
Thank you. Sam, over to you.
Well, I want to give a few shout outs. We have people who are friends that are been in Dubai, in fact. And there's just hello to Marco Hutunen and Duan Karen, who is a lawyer. He was doing all these tough hotel negotiation management agreements during my time. And then Karina C, I think she's still in Dubai. So hello to you. So just sort of nice to have you with us. And also Shenaz, she's based in Turkey or Cyprus. And Jean-Pierre Mifsud, he's from Malta, but I think he's based in Bulgaria. So we have an international audience very curious about the activities, what's happening in the Gulf. Obviously, what comes to my mind also is that from the time in the Gulf, we're relying on staff who are coming in for the time when they are on contracts and so on. How do you deal with this very challenging situation where the hotels are closed? Are they returning home to the home country and then coming back when the things are getting better? Or what is your view? Maybe we can get from Khalid your feedback on that.
Look, obviously, employees have been put on unpaid leave. I mean, paid leave and then followed by unpaid leave. So what our intention is to keep everybody on a payroll so far. And once the airline start to operate, people, they will be choosing to go back home and they will remain under our visa, hoping that the situation will improve. And once it's improved, because we believe that it's going to improve gradually, we will not be seeing a rebound gradually. So we will keep maybe 50% in the country, and the remaining 50% will eventually travel, and they will come back as needed.
Very good. And how about your situation in Jeddah?
Yeah, like I said earlier, it was a blessing that we had held off on recruitment, so we only have a skeleton headcount for now. The government had been very proactive in that sense, and they've launched a program where they subsidize up to 70% of people's salaries. We're talking mostly Saudi citizens that are covered under this program. As far as we're concerned, with the limited headcount that we have, we encourage people to take leave, just like Khalid said. Firstly, to sort of take whatever leave is remaining, and then after that to take unpaid leave. Some volunteered themselves to take unpaid leave because they see what the situation is like, and everyone is trying to help the best way they can. So we were obviously I failed to say earlier that we signed a management agreement with IG, with Intercontinental Hotels, for their newly introduced brand, Voco, and we're working very closely with them in order to make the right decisions and not cause any reputational damage, because there is a humane side to things, and the fact that all airlines are grounded. People, even if people volunteer to go home, they will not be able to go home. So we had to find a sort of a middle ground where where everyone is kept happy, basically.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And how about in Bahrain, Ali? Any comment from your side?
Yeah, I think most of the GCC governments took similar stance. They've come up with bailout packages or support packages or different levels of packages for both government sector and private sector. Bahrain is no different. So we announced about the $4.3 billion thing that I mentioned earlier, and a comprehensive package hitting different types of companies and SMEs across, trying to preserve salaries as much as possible. So all the local companies, or all the companies with a Bahraini CR can apply for those packages. Different packages are available for different types of staff that you have in terms of pays, nationalities, and so forth. But it's a very comprehensive package. The idea is to keep people afloat for as long as possible, be it at government level or at individual levels, as Khalid and Abdellah mentioned as well, both at private sector and public sector. there is going to be drain and loss on, I think, most sectors today. However, we're trying to cushion it as much as possible.
Understand. Well, thank you very much. And back to you, Abid.
Khalid, you have a fabulous portfolio of hotels currently, whether it's in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Egypt. Any growth plans, any other markets that you might have been considering before the pandemic, or markets that you would look at afterwards?
Look, our strategy has always been, to invest primarily in this region, and particularly in UAE. Now, considering the current circumstances, like anybody else, I think everybody is reviewing the situation and accordingly, but we believe that there will be some opportunities that will raise, and we will be happy to look at them and to eventually consider taking over a few assets.
I guess the question remains, and it's an open question. Maybe, Ali, if I may ask you, since you're directly involved in the real estate and foreign direct investment, how do you underwrite something like this pandemic? Any financial models wouldn't have worked in this circumstance. So, any thoughts on that?
Thank you for giving me an impossible answer. So I think I've seen a lot of models across the GCC as I've worked on the investment side, the sovereign side, public side, private side, in development and in tourism primarily. We've never accounted for that outlier number. What happens if there's a complete shutdown? It doesn't come to mind. So most financial models are designed to be on a going concern basis, with set terminal values based on whatever they're supposed to be logically. So yes, was this predicted? There's so many different now when we look back, there's so much information that was coming our way, but nobody packaged it in a COVID specific virus. But there's enough warnings around saying that something like this might be coming. Did we see it coming? No. Do we see it going away soon? That's the golden question today. On a personal basis, I think this will be around for a while. It's about how mankind adapts to it. What type of solutions do we get to live with it? It's going to be just like other flus. It might be around for a while. So what does that mean for hospitality, for co-working space, co-living space, for all types of real estate, for logistics? So for example, today, do we build a business model based on increased globalization or increased domestic tourism? So does Saudi Arabia benefit from this, for example, and it's part of a strategy? And do we build a co-living space, which we thought was the way of the future, or now we go back to our own silos again? Co-working is the next thing. How does that work? Are we safe to use Airbnb today? Because Airbnb is not even, so let's say I trust the Ritz-Carlton for Abu Dhabi Group, definitely, because it's a very well-known brand. But do I trust Airbnb to come up with a sanitized solution? So definitely unexpected, very difficult, but very, very logical that something like this was supposed to happen. And how do we deal with it? What is impressive is, yes, if you believe it or not, we didn't start off well fighting this as a global society. However, so far we're starting to get ahead of the game globally. I think the US is probably just about to turn around, but everybody else has started to get on top of this and started to listen. So places like New Zealand that have announced we're now free of this. China's come around. I said, I didn't expect that to be this fast. Even though it feels like it's been forever, but I thought this is too quick. 2 to 3 months, we've done well as mankind. And I think we need to learn from this. And what measures do we put in place going forward? Do we have an inventory like this always around? Do we go towards more isolated style resorts? Do we prefer that now over crowded resorts? So some of the new things that have come out of China, for example, even though they're not directly related to GCC greatly because it has a huge domestic tourism market. But for example, people are going to stay in hotels, which are now at 40-45% occupancies, but they prefer to stay right outside the area where it's supposed to be busy. So if it's a business center, I don't want to stay there. I'll stay right outside, so at least less crowded, and I don't have to be worried as much. But then the question comes in, do I trust Voco or do I trust Marriott? Who do I trust more now, for example? And then when it gets busy, can I continue to trust? I used to think when we used to travel to places like Thailand or some of the other places, part of the fun was getting the germs, right? But now that has gone away. So how do we deal with that?
Well, hopefully this kind of germs we would never get, but true. A lot of travelers, they yearn to experience what's available locally. They want to be able to interact with the local communities and really immerse in that culture. Let's talk a little bit about the trends in US because of COVID-19. Unfortunately, US has gone through very tough times, but yes, it seems like we're starting to turn the corner. Some of the old concepts of drive-in theaters or dine in the cars with the car hops where they brought the food to you in the car, some of those old concepts are being dusted and brought back for application, at least in the immediate future. Any new trends, any new initiatives that you might think as we come out of it? Abdullah, if I may start with you.
Yeah, so we're talking about the new normal, right?
Whatever that happens to be.
The aftermath. Here, I mean, here in Saudi Arabia, we haven't seen any of that really. There's certainly no drive-in cinemas, for example. But there's been a surge in the people ordering food to their homes, obviously, and that was one of the activities that was allowed to continue. So, but apart from that, we haven't seen much really. Everyone is keeping safe in their own homes. You look out now, you could be looking at one of the main arteries in Jeddah for a good 15 minutes before a car passes by. So people are taking this really, really seriously. They're confining themselves in their own homes. Occasionally, they go out to buy some groceries and then run back to the safety of their homes.
You know, this pandemic has changed the world a great deal. If there is a silver lining during this stay-home time period, I understand some of the places like LA, which had terrible problems with smog, or London, or Delhi, or for that matter, a lot of the cities in China, the quality of air is fantastic. So if there is a silver lining, maybe the Mother Earth needed a bit of time to cleanse the lungs before it starts out again. Khalid, you had talked about deploying technology to attend to some of the routine functions that go on. Can you share some of the technologies that you might be considering?
Well, as I said earlier, I mean, I think keyless technology was already, it exists in few hotels around the world. This is something that we are exploring today. We will start implement this within our hotels within the next 2-3 weeks. So it's, there are some equipments that needs to be replaced, basically, some softwares. Also, online check-in, check-out. It's also important because people, they would like to avoid, contact and facing a receptionist, basically. So he wouldn't even need to reach the reception. He can have his code sent to his mobile phone, and then check out the same way. The other technology we are looking at is the way today they sanitize the rooms, in the hospitals. So there is some special UV lighting that it's sort of machine that will eventually sanitize the whole room, eventually after check out of the customer. Again, I think we will be happy to embrace any technology that will allow us to offer the confidence to our customers that we will really implement whatever is required to ensure their health and safety. And that's extremely important today.
I think some of the things that we've talked about in the past, and all of us are learning as we go through this cycle, menus that are very commonplace in our restaurants and public areas. Does that have to go completely digital so that the menu is not being passed around, or is it a disposable menu? Restaurants feel the best when they are busy. Do we have to reduce the capacity? Certainly in the immediate terms, that's what's being talked about. But does it have to be that way moving forward? How does the design change? All these conversations are concurrently occurring. I believe at this point, none of us have the prototypical answer, but hopefully we will learn together in through platforms like this. We will continue to actively involve in these discussions. I think we are approaching towards the end of this session. So, Sam, do we have any comments or questions? Anything over to you?
No, there hasn't been any comments here. Basically, we're just getting sort of a thumbs up and thank you for the feedback from, but not any particular question that has been raised. So I think our panelist has been very thorough in describing the situation and also what the future will hold for itself. So I think we are good for that.
Thank you. Just a quick plug for hospitality industry people. This is undoubtedly one of the industries that is hardest hit. I had started a campaign on different platforms, whether it's Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, hashtag hospitality heroes. I would strongly encourage the industry to recognize the people that are working day in and day out, even though the business has dropped precipitously, but coming back, it is because of our teams, it is because of our associates that this industry thrives. So if you hear of somebody, if you think of somebody who has gone above and beyond and extended some acts of kindness, please do go on these channels and recognize with hashtag hospitality heroes. Before we wrap it up, and I'll go around the room, just something personal that you might have learned during this process, and some great story that you might be able to share with our audience. And I'll start with Abdullah, if it's okay.
Thank you. I think that's a great initiative that you launched, the unsung heroes, or rather people that go the extra mile. And I'm sure we'll see a lot of those in our immediate environment. So we'll be sure to keep an eye on that and make sure the world knows about them. As far as what the takeaways from this unprecedented crisis or situation, one of the obvious things is by being confined in our own homes, we come to appreciate the warmth of our own families. And as you know, all of us in hospitality, we work unbelievable hours. And we tend sometimes to work overnight in our different properties. It's one of the most demanding industries, I think, out there, because the hotel is open 24 hours. We tend to want to give the best of ourselves to make sure that the service delivery is at its optimum. So now in this situation and being forced to stay at home, we've come to appreciate that side of things, and hopefully we'll learn from that so that in the future we strive to create that balance between work and family. Um, uh, Very few of us are going to succeed to do that, but at least this gave us a taste of what it could be. And I hope we'll manage to include that in our lifestyles.
Abdullah, we'll have a session in a few months as we start to wrap up specifically about that and see how we've lived up to that. Let me
To be continued. Right?
to be continued, of course. Let me move over to Khalid. Any stories that you would like to share, Khalid? Khalid, do we have you on mute, I believe.
Do you hear me?
Yes, yes, we hear you.
Yep.
Yeah. Look, I mean, apart from the importance of agility and reactivity that it's quite necessary in this type of crisis, I think another element or another word that would come is empathy and the way we look after our employees and associates. I think this is extremely important, and as I have said in previous conferences, that I think, which is really a shame that we didn't feel any empathy from the large operators towards staff, and that's very unfortunate. We didn't, I mean, these giants so far, I'm not sure, maybe in the future, some of them will come some kind of assistance, but nothing has been done from this giant towards their associate except sending them some letters, and that's very unfortunate. And if we learn something, I hope that we will learn to, in the future, to come up with solidarity funds, really to assist all these employees that are today on unpaid leave all over the world.
Thank you, Khalid. And last but not least, Sally, any stories in the industry that you would like to share, or anything personal that you might have had an epiphany on over the past few weeks?
So there's plenty of this, right? But I think I'll put on two hats. One as an official hat of a government employee, and the second of a father, I think. So I'll finish with the father part. The government side, I think this definitely is a time where leadership and how the nations come together to fight something like this exemplifies and helps you realize or appreciate where you live and where you belong. So for me, in that regards, I've been completely fulfilled with satisfaction how Bahrain handled it and how our leadership handled this, and it's keeping us safe. And we feel very, very gratuitous for this to pass by us with such ease so far, if I would say. So I'm very, very grateful for being in Bahrain and being part of this great nation, even if it's a tiny island. On a second note, though, I'm equally as grateful to get to know my kids and family again. So I'm spending time at home with them and starting to know that my 3-year-old is quite a character, and my 6-year-old is quite a writer. I didn't know that. So my 6-year-old has finished about 12 books in the last month, and now she's reading The Hobbit. So at 6-year-old, that's pretty impressive, right? So I told her, why don't you start writing something? And then she started writing, and I'm addicted to her stories. And I started sharing her stories with some of my cousins and her aunts, and they actually were very impressed. One of the cool things was the depth of impact of something like this on even a kid. So in one of her lines, she was writing about a jaguar, a fighting jaguar that came from another world. And when you read through the whole story, you realize that fighting jaguar was actually coming from a world where everything was normal. And he ends his story by saying, can you take me back to the world where I belong? And this is by a 6-year-old, right? It's a fantastic little story that is stuck with me, and that quote is stuck with me. And I asked myself that, and I asked others, can we go back to where we were? And do I want to go back to that now? Or do I want to take a bit of this and take that forward as well. This is in my opinion, a summary of what we are feeling in terms of emotion, in terms of career, in terms of life today.
Well, that was a great story. Thank you for sharing that, Ali. And before I turn it over to Sam, agility is becoming more and more and more important, as Khalid said. We have to be able to adjust at the very end. Just to share a story, and thanks to Sam and his creativeness to get this session on live, on the air, on time, we've had to change our technology platforms at the last second. A lot of these digital gatherings are occurring as a result of the pandemic that we're dealing with. Though we are physically apart, but I think in many ways, a lot of us are far closer together than we might have been pre-COVID time. Just in closing, again, a great thank you and a gratitude to the frontline people and first responders, whether they're medical care people or grocery store people that are working day in and day out to provide for all the rest of us. Thank you very much. To all the people that joined us live, we really appreciate it. Please continue to join us for our future sessions and actively participate in telling us what topics you would like to discuss. From the panel, we already have a topic 6 or 8 months from now, whether we have lived up to this work-life balance or not, but we will bring that to you in the future. But thank you again for being with us. We look forward to having you back in the next session. Over to you, Sam.
Well, you took the word out of my mouth, Abid, so I have not much else to add to this, but I just want to thank everyone again. My thoughts and prayers out to everyone in the Gulf, and I wish everything will be back to the new normal and everything will be good for all of you. And also for everyone who is watching this, if you're for the YouTube viewers, just press subscribe and press that button and you'll be notified when we are going live next, because we will continue our virtual journey to meet industry leaders. And for all the LinkedIn viewers, again, great to have you with us here also today. And also we will share this recorded video also on our Hospitality Talks group page on LinkedIn. So this